Good morning to all of our Youth Solutions family, friends, and supporters, and welcome to our first in-person live broadcast of Coffee with a Purpose. Today's topic is diversity, equity, inclusion, and youth. My name is Julie Earle, and I'm the Student Success Manager at the Bridge Academy of Southwest Michigan in Benton Harbor. I'm excited to be joined today by my co-moderator, Terry Albers, Population Health Specialist at Spectrum Health, and by our Jobs for Michigan graduates, or JMG as we like to call it, panelists to attend Bridge Academy. Today's session will be one of a three-part series on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. In this hour, we look forward to the opportunity to celebrate the synergy in our diversity and have a conversation about the importance of seeing the greatness in everyone's unique story. As our youth share their experiences, we'll discuss how we must make space for everyone at the table by learning from our future leaders and what they feel they need to achieve a more equitable tomorrow for us all. We're excited to have Terry here with us to join us in this conversation today. So Terry.
Oh, thank you, Julie. This is such a wonderful opportunity to engage with these young leaders in a discussion that I hope will bring others in our community to have a better understanding of one another and learn ways we can change the future for so many of our youth throughout the state. Again, my name is Terry Albers. I'm the Population Health Specialist at Corval Health South, formerly Lakeland. And it's my sincere pleasure to work with a team of professionals and partnering organizations to bring DEI to our communities. I am also an instructor for the Youth Mental Health First Aid Program. I strive to educate adults using appropriate and inclusive language to kind of level up inclusion throughout our communities. As we know, language is so important. It can help a person feel safe and provide the means for a comfortable communication and conversation that will inspire connection. So just as a review, Mental Health First Aid is an interactive program that teaches adults how to identify and understand response of mental illness and substance use disorders in youth. And this provides adults who interact with youth the skills that they need to reach out and provide support to our young adolescents who may be experiencing a mental health challenge or substance use. We help them to connect. We help them learn the language. We know that's so important today. And so for this conversation, I just encourage all of you as youth leaders to bring your voice to help us bring change throughout. So let me share with you a little bit about the why. And that is because you've already made a very impactful community level change that brought a new program to our area. See, a few years ago, we had at Bridge Academy something that was called Photo Voice, where we actually asked you questions and you took pictures throughout the community to interact with us to show what that meant to be a healthy community. And we listened. In fact, that led to a program called Growth, which is a career exploration internship program at St. Joseph Hospital, which again brings together an opportunity for healthcare and education where your voice matters. So and actually, I think we have a few growth interns and graduates here with us today. Again, just encouraging you to provide your voice today in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Terry. And with that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists from the JMG program here at Bridge Academy that we have with us today. So first, I'm going to try to go in order here. First, we have Jalen Bannister. And Jalen is 18 and he has a dream to start his own homeless shelter. And he's very passionate about helping those in the homeless community. And he also loves animals, especially his dog, Zeus, who is the best dog. And next we have Brooke Triplett. Brooke is 16 and she is one of the growth interns who graduated from Growth. Jalen is as well, I should mention that. Both of them were involved in Growth last summer and had a great experience. Brooke plans to be an anesthesiologist one day, and she loves helping people. Next, we have Zakari. He goes by Zach Morris. He's 16 and he works very hard to be the best version of himself and positively influence everyone around him to be their best selves. He's also very into fashion, videography, and photography, and I've seen some of his pictures. They're amazing. Next, we have Owen Hamlet. Owen is 16 and he's very passionate about history and one day wants to be a historian. And he's very interested in the lessons that can be learned from the past. Next, we have Zendia Street. And India's 15, and I have to brag about India because she's just killing it in her academics and passing classes, and I could not be more proud of her right now. India wants to be a nurse, and she so wants to do what she loves, which is helping people. She's really excited about our endeavors to start a peer-to-peer counseling program here at Bridge Academy, again in partnership. And then we have Jasmine Harris and Jasmine Harris Branscombe. She's 16 and Jasmine wants to be a gynecologist, specializing in helping women of color by creating the narrative that gynecology and women's health should be talked about more openly. And last but definitely not least, we have Ian Watson, who's 16. And Ian enjoys botany and the study of everything plants and nature, and he loves the outdoors and very much enjoys music. So that's our
Well, thank you. Thank you all again very much for engaging in such an important conversation this morning. For our audience members who wish to ask a question to any of our panelists, we ask you to use the chat function and we will be monitoring that throughout the session and have reserved some time also at the end to answer any of the questions from the audience.
Thank you, Terry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to our panel of youth, and I want to start the conversation by letting everyone here know that this is a safe space, and you're welcome to share as much as you wish or as little as you wish. I know this is an important conversation, but it can also be a very sensitive one, and we want all of you to feel comfortable. That's really important to us. So I'm going to take some time to ask each of you questions directly. But please feel free to chime in if you have something to add after someone else shares. Okay, we want to have this actually be a conversation and a dialogue. So let's start our hour by focusing on the why, which brings me to the first question for all of you, and it's a big one. We want to know why you wanted to be a part of this conversation today. I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Jalen, if that's okay.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to be a part of this conversation today was to try and make a change in the community and the school community in general, and just to give my thoughts and opinions out there. Student.
Perfect, thank you. What about you, Brooke?
Well, personally, I think it's important to just stand for the youth and
Love
be
it.
a part of this wonderful conversation.
Love it. What about you, Zach?
I would say, to help the community grow, just like, help out. I just want to make a change.
Good answer. What do you think, Owen?
I would say that I joined to talk about a lot of these more issues concerning diversity and inclusion around it. It's a very important subject.
India?
Well,
Okay. Answer. You want to think about it, Kim?
yeah.
All right. Jasmine, what do you think? Why do you want to be a part of this conversation?
I wanted to be a part of this conversation, like Owen said, mostly about the diversity because healthcare, they doctors have little problems.
So what about you, Ian?
Well, like I said, diversity and inclusion.
Yes. Okay, so I want to follow up with what, can you talk to me a little bit about your experiences leading up to you coming to Bridge Academy? And maybe what brought you to this school and what you experienced before you came to this school?
Thing that I experienced before I came to this school was that many other schools don't listen to their students, and like it's more of neglectiveness than like welcoming your students. But when I came to JMG and Bridge Academy, it was different. It was like they listen to your students, they care about what you say, and they actually want to make a difference off of what you say.
Thank you, Jalen. What about you, Brooke?
Well, actually, so before I came to Bridge, my former school was, it was during the pandemic, and it was hard because it was virtual schooling. So you didn't get as much as support that, if you were, since you're used to being in person, you didn't get as much as support that you needed. And so, but here, you get all the support you need, not just academically, but emotionally as well. So I think that's a win-win.
Thank you so much. What about you?
Can you repeat the question?
What was your previous experience like with diversity and inclusion, before leading up to what brought you to Bridge Academy?
Say, like, as far as like the schools I used to go to, it was just like a lot of negativity. I agree with some of what Jen said too, because not a lot of like communities and teachers will like sit down and actually talk to you and listen about what you gotta say. And I like that about this school, most definitely. And I'll just say that there's a lot of less negativity and more like welcoming feeling here. Yeah.
Thank you. Owen?
There are many reasons that I've decided to come to this school, but one reason that was very well,
We can come back to you.
yeah.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, that's a good one.
And you, what about you? What was your experience like before Bridge Academy?
Like what Brooke said, during the pandemic, it wasn't that much help around. They just give you the class to pass on. Even before the pandemic, it wasn't that much. But then when I came here and I started doing better, I got all up to date with my classes. And more support. Not even that. It's that y'all listen. Not just let me see there. But y'all listen.
What about you, Jasmine?
Before I came to the school, I went to like a previous school that was like racist, and it had a problem, like a really big problem, and they wouldn't listen whenever I had a problem. They would either try to fix the situation, but the situation would never fix. So they would just really.
It's too bad. What about you?
Feel like the previous school too, we were so treated the kids as a bird and also individually. I feel like here get the one teacher from the base is the reverse of the base, which maybe kids who more behind.
That's a good answer. Owen, did you wanna?
Yes. Just stuck in the room TVs and transition. Yeah, answer. But my previous experiences at other schools were pleasant for the most part, but what they were mainly lacking was the resources to handle these different issues and things. Resources in the material sense, in the knowledge sense, lack of experience, all of these were contributing. But
So just piggybacking off of that, and those were such great answers, and thank you all for being so open about this. It's really important that we have these conversations, like we said. Bridge Academy also, of course, has the Jobs for Michigan Graduates program. Would anyone like to speak on what part of Jobs for Michigan Graduates kind of makes Bridge a little different and what you get out of being a part of the JMG program? You want to go, Jalen?
Yeah, I would say, wait, can you repeat the question?
Like, we know, you all kind of mentioned why Bridge feels different to you.
Sure.
And one of the things that Bridge has that you all have been participating in and what brought us here is being part of the Jobs for Michigan Graduates program that we work on every afternoon. And I'm wondering what part, if like there's something about that jumps out to you as especially helpful or different when it comes to your sense of belonging.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful because we're gonna need to learn how to work for a job one day. So I find that's helpful really for Bridge Academy to do because you need to teach your kids how to work. That's eventually what they're gonna be doing one day. So I feel like that is a good thing that goes on in Bridge Academy.
That's really great, Jalen. So JMG teaches you life skills beyond just the academics, like about working and making money and things like that. Does anyone else have anything specific that, go ahead, Owen.
the JMG program definitely does one thing way better than the other schools, which is it definitely piques your interest more in college. Does a better, like how more after high school activities, basically jobs, college, stuff like that. But it does specifically help with each of those things individually for the most, especially depending on the student. Job after high school, college after high school. For me, I went to college after high school, so specifically to me, they catered to my needs to go to college and stuff, to get experience and stuff like that, and just helping me generally to get along the way. And I really like that aspect of individuality too.
So the individual approach that we take with each student, find out what you're interested in and try to teach you more about those different options that you have for the future.
Yeah, I would say it's needed for something like college jobs, specifically because most students have different ideas what they want to do after high school. So it's one thing where being a hybrid individual.
What individualized,
Yeah,
think about it too. I didn't think about it too. That's such a great answer. Does anyone else have any specific reason that they want to mention, or is that kind of covered? Yeah, he did a pretty good job. So just to summarize, you all prior to coming here had experiences where you were maybe excluded or discriminated against based on your race or other reasons, and you didn't feel like you were getting one-on-one attention at your previous schools or treated like an individual, or that they had the resources to provide you what you needed. That kind of summarize.
I also listened carefully and a theme kind of raised top of my head is the need for social connections, or like that social wellness that is so important, that I felt hearing you say it wasn't at your other schools. That inclusion is so important. Connections, relationships are so important to you, well, to everybody actually, right? To help you grow in this space, develop your skill sets, soft skills, or whatever academic skills to kind of bring you to life journey. So with that said, can you tell me and share with me right now, what can adults do, the audience listening? What can adults do like right now to make you help you feel included, help you feel seen and heard in this conversation? What does that look like?
And please speak up just a little bit. The mic's having a little bit of trouble. That's why I'm repeating some things. Okay.
What can adults do? I feel like for adults as teachers, they could not be as neglective because some teachers are neglective, and that's what that's the gap between some teachers and student relationships. Is that some teachers feel like they need to be neglected because that student is a student.
So they're not treating the student as a person. It's just like you're a number. I think Ian kind of referred to that with the herd mentality, that it's a herd of kids, not individual.
Lack of that connection, Julie.
Yeah.
Lack of that connection and just having a few minutes, right? Students, anybody else?
Just trying to say, definitely non-adults vote.
Oh,
Vote. But that's one big reason, of course. I would definitely say a lot of things would change if mostly adults, especially at Harbor, would vote. Or just across the county in general, honestly. Even statewide.
because voting, you get to vote about things like what, like putting money into schools or, yeah. What a great answer. Thank you for sharing.
Another element definitely is a sense of more community. Adults nowadays, especially, I guess not intrinsically protective of their kids, but more wary of making families. Like, oh, stay in our house. Like, oh, maybe you shouldn't go talk to the neighbor's kid. Like, or maybe another time neighbors.
It's important. Why do you think people are like, there's less of a neighborhood community? People are less likely to go meet their neighbors. What do you think? What do you think is causing that failure in people to connect? There used to be like those neighborhood garage sales, neighborhood watch parties. If you were in trouble, you knew you could go to your neighbor's house. What do you think has changed?
Pandemic is one thing, but I think it's really built into the core. Well, suburbia is one thing, white picket fences, fence all around the house. It's very individualistic, like very like John said. It's not always a good thing to be individualized, especially in community stuff like that.
So people are more worried about themselves than
Yes.
their community as a
Yeah.
whole.
Definitely.
Have you seen that in the last years, like because of COVID? Is that something that is surfacing to the kind of concerns?
Yeah, definitely. You'll see it all the time. I go whenever I'm in my neighborhood. Barely ever see anyone. I just see a couple people walking their dogs or just doing a little jog. It's exercise. No one's. I mean, I guess winter does contribute to something, but it really hasn't snowed in the past few days. Weeks, I would say. So that really excuse, oh, it's winter and stuff like that. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely.
It brings me, I'm gonna go to you, Jasmine, if that's okay, because I'd love to hear what about, it kind of relates to what I was saying about what adults can do right now. You mentioned women of color not getting appropriate health care. What do you think adults could do right now to change that?
They should listen to women of color. When last birthing, for example, they're having complications giving birth to a child, and they're verbally telling you that, hey, I'm having complications, and they're ignoring it, saying you're fine, fine, and they don't do anything until like the last minute where you're dead or you're seriously injured. And
How can we move the needle on that? How can we make that better? your system? Listening,
It's
listening.
just running more tests because some people they won't run more tests because they just don't take women of color seriously.
To change that.
Yeah, that's really deep and it makes me start to think about insurance, of course, and coverage and whether there's a discrepancy there. Do you have any thoughts about that? Do you think that contributes to that?
Yeah, because a lot of Black people are low income, and a lot of people don't want to deal with low income, so they're just gonna go. They're gonna treat them not as well. They'll give them the same treatment that they would give to someone who had like better insurance. And I think that's
No, that's really important. And I'm just gonna kind of reiterate to make sure everyone could hear Jasmine talking about, how women of color, she feels are not getting as many tests, and maybe overlooked because they're low income or don't have as good insurance and are not getting adequate care and are just not being heard or listened to or taken seriously. And that's so important. Thank you for sharing, Jasmine. Thank you, Jasmine. That's super important. Just anyone else, have any thoughts on what else adults can do right now to make things better for you? Is there things that we can do at the school as programs, as a community that would help you feel better?
We looked at, a sense of community, a sense of, coming together more. We looked at how teachers, better engagement with students. Voting. Is there anything else that you have any thoughts? Yes.
I actually just have a question. So, when you say like what I have for my answer to, I don't know if I understand the question correctly, but I mean, starting a community gathering for young people of all different diversities. I mean, I could get connections with different areas that they might need. I mean, I think that would be a good idea. Starting
Really good
I
idea.
love that community gatherings that are not discriminatory. They're very welcoming to everybody.
Yeah.
Regardless of
all ethnicities.
all ethnicities. I love that.
Well, I would also like to add that, I know we talk about adults, but I would encourage bringing youth to the table and running those community gatherings.
Mm.
That's what this is all about, right? Having that voice, actually action oriented, and doing something and bringing groups together and learning from each other and being very inclusive for all. Thank you for bringing that up. Go ahead, Owen.
I would like, looking back at what I said, I'd like to clear up one thing that's really important to understand. It's the first thing I said, concerning community, which is parents fund, the neighborhood. Like, oh, don't, like the example I use, like, oh, don't go play with the neighborhood kid, he's weird. I would like to definitely change that into something that's more useful to the point I'm trying to make. And that would probably be that it's more, don't talk to them at all. Just keep to yourself, that idea. It's not really that nothing's wrong with the neighbors, it's just that everyone thinks they should just keep to themselves. The idea of expression with others, expression is more keep to yourself, expression with yourself.
So you'd like to see parents and other people in the community working harder to encourage the outreach and encouraging their kids to get to know the neighbor kid instead of don't talk to the weird neighbor kid.
Well, less like that, it's not, it's just the underlying problem is that everyone is just so in and only with themselves and stuff like that. That's for a lot of reasons, way too many to get into today.
Yeah.
But that's like the main reason. I definitely like to place that.
What a great answer. Thank you.
And we've also mentioned, all of the panelists, how we treat each other is so important, right, for inclusion. So with that in mind, what does an inclusive environment look like to you? Anybody like to respond? Go ahead, Ian.
Basically, creation and treatment, the way you want to be treated. And, yeah.
Kind, show kindness.
Treat people the way you want to be treated. Anybody else, have anything about, like, how we treat each other is so important. How can we treat each other? How can we be better to each other?
Being paranoid. There's- when you go there's- pick up, see it. Pick up things, and then you see instruction.
Because it's everybody's, not just yours.
It's the communities.
It's like people don't care about what's around
I
them.
feel like that's like your community is.
That seems really closely tied to what everyone was talking about people just being worried about themselves and not the greater picture.
Because there's more than just you.
There's more than just you. That's, I like that.
I talked earlier about inclusive language. So with that said, I mean, what are some ideas that you might have for others to use more of their important language that includes everyone? Any thoughts about that? Where can we go and do better?
What's inclusive language? Like? What is non-inclusive language like? What makes you feel like you're excluded? Right, maybe we go from the different.
Sure.
Language is a very important everyday lives, our existence as people, society. So it's very important to use language that makes, like, to echo what you guys said, people feel inclusive. Definitely. I think people really understate the effects of inclusive language or just language in general. A lot of people do. It's just kind of stupid, honestly. Language has a very profound effect on the mind. It's used to communicate, obviously, and stuff. Communication is a big part of your life. So when all that communication is just about, or it isn't necessarily negative towards you, but non-inclusive towards you, you kind of feel excluded. You kind of feel like you're not being represented when something from this.
So language and body language can really affect how much you feel included or excluded. People just don't think about it that much.
Yeah.
And that's what I mentioned in the mental health first aid, like next to you, it's geared towards adults. We talk about that. We talk about listening non-judgmentally with that language piece, learning what's language and things to stay away from as far as, excluding groups, but also just be able to be inclusive and really, really be engaged in the conversations. Because too much, I would say, adults are hurry, 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 do this and do that, right?
No,
For real.
It's not real, she says.
It's not for real. So thank you for that. Call us out. Right?
I really want to go to Jalen on this because Jalen, you shared a story about when you were in middle school about a certain teacher and classroom experience that you had. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, it was a teacher, and he was a teacher that normal, nice teacher. He was going through stuff at home, and the students knew that. Well, I would assume they knew that, but every day, like in class, like them students would give him such a hard time by like not participating in the work he assigned, not sitting in the assigned seats, not like just being really disrespectful. And like I feel as if you know a teacher or anybody is going through something, you shouldn't add into that like heavy baggage that they're carrying at the moment because you never know what they would do. And unfortunately, actually, and, it just shows to like be aware of other people's feelings and like just have an eye open for other people's feelings and not just like yourself.
It's so powerful, and I really appreciate you sharing the importance of empathy. And making sure with everybody, we're looking at, we don't know anybody's story, what goes on when we're not with them, and not making assumptions. That's what I'm hearing. I really appreciate you sharing that. I really appreciate you all sharing with us what you've personally seen and experienced. It really matters. And with that said, I would really like to ask you, Terry, to take a moment to share with us a bit more on your background, because I think you have some tools to help us bridge this DEI conversation with mental health, and peer-to-peer work that you do and how some maybe our peers can help each other. Can you talk to us a little bit more about knowing more about mental health and wellness and increasing our DEI awareness?
Right, so, first of all, when we did our community needs assessment, something we have to do every 3 years, you know, we ask questions throughout our community. That was where the photo voice came through. When we asked, you know, what are the priority health needs in our community? What do you think are things we need to work on? And the mental health rose to the top year after year, just rose to the top. And that wasn't surprising to us since we know that mental health challenges in our youth today exist. In fact, 1 in 5 have some type of mental health challenge that they're struggling a bit. And even adults struggling is 1 in 5. So we're all struggling so much through, you know, post-pandemic, things we've gone through, a sense of disconnect, right? We talked about that, relationships, how it's more valued for in-person connections and relationships and such. So there's also this stigma, right? The stigma associated with mental health challenges and leaving people feeling judged, misunderstood, ashamed. And I know our young people, you know, that I've talked with, they just don't want to burden adults with things that they're going, because we see adults struggling as well sometimes. You know, there's been some mention here this morning on that. And so we know also, like from data and from research, when a person who may be struggling gets help earlier and have early interventions kind of lens, the better the outcome. So again, that's why I think it's so important when we start having these conversations and having our community come together and be able to talk about mental illnesses, mental health, to really come to a common ground and reach for more of a mental wellness, where we can have that respectful relationships, we can be seen and heard, not be judged for who we are. That's where I think it's really important to take away from this conversation. And then also understanding some triggers, right? Triggers that make us feel uncomfortable and cause us discomfort. We know about our own self-awareness. What does that look like? And develop skills to respond, to know when we need to kind of take a step back and focus on self-care, focus on ourselves. And it's not, Owen, I know you talked about how sometimes we fall back to ourselves. Sometimes that can be appropriate, but we can't get stuck there, right? We need to rely on other people in our community to connect with, to kind of give us that hand, right? So we can all kind of walk together in that journey and know that it just matters. We all can just be at this table, it's conversations. And I would hope that we have kind of conversations and bringing more of that community wellness, community sense together to kind of look at these suggestions that were talked about here this morning and put the voice out there, come together as a community gotta break down these barriers.
Just a quick question based on what Terry said. At the table, just by a show of hands, how many of you, either yourself, have a family member or a friend or all of the above who struggled with anxiety or depression? Everybody. So why is it so hard for people to talk about or share that that's going on when it's literally everybody knows someone or has experienced it? We can probably help a lot of people with their anxiety and their depression if we normalize talking about it the same way we need to normalize talking about the healthcare needs of women with color. We have to not be afraid to have these conversations. So Terry, thank you so much for giving us some more information about that. That transitions really well into our next little segment. I have just a few more things to ask you all before we turn to the Zoom audience for some of their questions that I'm sure that they have today. Do you have any thoughts about how we can start these conversations with other people? We talked about like if students come in to your space and maybe are acting a certain way that's making you feel uncomfortable, or you feel like maybe they're judging you because of your race or your hair or your weight or your sexuality or anything like that. How do we start that conversation? I'm going to turn to you, Zach, because when you and I were talking, you talked a lot about teaching people about those skills. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I would say, to answer the question, like, you just gotta be like open with the person and like not be afraid to like be like, hey, like what's going on? Like you gotta be open and honest. I don't feel like there's really no other way to go about it. Cause if, like someone's seeming off, if someone's seeming down, or if just they're acting a certain way towards somebody, you just gotta be there to be like, hey, just let them know.
I love that answer. And one thing that Zach mentioned and what he's talking about now is being open and honest with these conversations and not being afraid to educate people, because sometimes the reason that they approach the way that they do is lack of knowledge. So we can't be afraid to educate them or tell them, right? And you really brought that up there, and I thought that was such a great point. Does anybody else have any thoughts on how we can start having more of these conversations and not be afraid to be open about it? Oh, you're just itching at that.
I would say by just be welcoming to one and another. It's like there's like, for instance, there's like some people where you could tell like by not even talking to them, you can just tell that, like they're not a welcoming type of person, or they got an attitude and stuff like that. But I feel as if everybody could just be welcoming with like a good, spirit, energy, and just a welcoming attitude, it'd be all right. Like everybody would get along. Just
So having that positive attitude, either when other people don't. I read the other day in one of those little Facebook things that softness always overcomes hardness, right? So when people come in angry, I think what I'm hearing you say is don't feed off that energy. Just keep bringing positive, welcoming energy, and eventually that will help them, because we don't know as we talked about earlier, we don't know what's going on with them that's causing them to come into the environment feeling that way, right? That's such a great answer, Jalen. Thank you so much for sharing. So we're talking about accountability, being accountable for your own energy and not feeding into negative energy and continuing to be kind and welcoming. Why is that so important that we're that accepting? And what do you think makes it hard to do? Is it fear? Why is it hard to, sometimes we lower ourselves to the energy of negativity and negative people coming in the room? Why is it hard to hold your own?
Because everybody's things. Yeah, most people are just too scared to be themselves.
So much about what other people think of us instead of just being proud of who we are.
Cause I didn't fit in.
They want to fit in.
So social media.
Social media.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean by social media? Can you really elaborate?
Yeah, basically, social media, how I see social media as is like another personality. And like, for instance, you have this reality personality where like you're in this form and you're like in person, and online you have another whole, like you're a whole different person type stuff. And some people actually take that like too personal, like they take the online stuff too personal. That's why I feel like people can't do that, because like they're so stuck in the online world and like stuff like that. They're not actually like tapped in with themselves and love themselves and like want to be themselves.
So social media is really interfering with people's self-image and living their lives and being who they are, because they're wrapped up in how they're presenting themselves and how other people are viewing them on social media.
Is that what you're, we get that right?
I'm trying to repeat back a little just to make sure we're getting the gist, because what you're saying is just so important. So I just really, really appreciate all of your answers here. Now we're gonna take some questions from the audience. Okay, I'm sure that they've asked some really good ones. We're gonna take a minute just to look through here. If you see a good one, feel free.
There's a comment in the chat. I'll go ahead and share it with you. It's a very valid point in the medical community in which public health in general, with economically disadvantaged citizens, including women of color. So Jasmine, your voice was heard, and we appreciate that. And I feel we need to do more, do better. I think we're going to be having some conversations. Okay, thank you for sharing.
We have another question from the audience that says, I feel like kids are better equipped and more open to diversity now than the adults. How do you all think that adults, how we can connect adults to kids to tap into the positive energy of youth? Which I think is just, I love this. Maybe a reverse mentoring opportunity. Maybe it's not always the young people who need the adults, but maybe some of the adults need the young people. Do you think that would work?
Yeah, I feel that would work, because there are definitely some kids out there that are not more knowledgeable than adults. And not saying that in like a bad way, but there's generally some students out there that like know what they're talking about, and some people don't. Like some adults don't want to listen to that, but some adults need to listen to that. Because I feel like some adults feel like if a student is like more knowledgeable than them, then they feel like, how do I say it? They feel like they don't feel as like the teacher, like they don't feel as if they're the teacher because the student know more than them. But I feel as if they listen to that student and gain that knowledge from that student, it makes sense. Yeah.
So adults shouldn't be afraid to feel like they are less wise or less of a mentor to you just because they're learning something from you as well, and it needs to be a two-way street. Great answer, Jayla. Thank you. Does anyone else want to tackle that before we go on to some others?
Julie, I do have a comment and a question I would like to bring up to the panelists as well, is what type of body language can people give off that would be exclusive to another? So help us understand, what do you think is the body language adults can try not to do? Does anything come to mind? Eye contact.
Eye contact. I was just gonna say that.
So eye contact matters. We need to do more eye contact. Is that correct? What else? Anything that brings to mind? No, we talked about listening, but like really listening, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Oh, the
The
tone.
tone of voice.
And you had one, Jalen?
I'll say just like the genuineness, like it, like when the teacher's listening, it has to be genuine. Because sometimes when a teacher listening, it don't actually be genuine. Like you can feel that it's not genuine. I just feel like it needs to be genuine.
So you want them to feel like they're humans too,
Mhm.
being genuine,
Actually care about what your students saying.
actually care what the student's saying. What makes you feel like they don't?
Like James and eye contact. You have to actually listen because they think they're grown. So so they have to respect them. But when we all should have equal respect.
Mutual respect.
Right.
Mutual respect.
Mutual respect.
And there's a comment in there about teachers and students come in all ages. That is powerful.
Yeah, yeah.
Love that. Thank you for sharing.
So I have a question here from Diane Young that says, great job, everyone, first of all, and that these conversations are hard to have, but so important. Are you all willing to use your voices outside of Bridge Academy to have other conversations around this topic to help the community?
Seeing some yes.
All yeses.
All that's,
Definitely.
yes.
from
Which is
that.
exciting. We talked about community building and coming together with gatherings, and we've mentioned that your voice is so important to come to the table with that. So, thank you, Diane.
And we have another one from Lauren that says, thank you all for sharing your thoughts with us today. A question for all of you is, what is a goal you're working on that JMG is helping you achieve? A personal goal that you're working on, that you're getting help with?
Right now, me personally at school, getting past getting to that graduating point, really.
Graduating? What about you, Brooke?
Setting boundaries.
Setting boundaries. That is, what a great.
Yeah, can you elaborate, speak just a little bit about
Well,
boundaries?
Me personally, I get easily distracted and it can be hard for me to stay focused. But once I'm focused, I'm there and setting boundaries to get there. It helps.
Great.
Thank you.
What about you?
I would say just like being here and it just helps me with staying positive and staying academically on track.
Be on track.
And I really just enjoy how everyone here tried to help each other, and it's just a lot of positive energy.
So building the community with positive energies. What about you on what personal goal is JMG helping you achieve? I know you talked about that already about, you don't have to answer it again if you want to. You talked about college and really exploring the different careers.
Yeah, that's definitely one of job experience. Experience.
What about you, India? What are you working on?
I'm working on graduating. I'm working on being a CNA. I'm working on being a RN. They help me with that. College. What he said, job. Y'all want me to keep going?
I
But
love
yeah. Oh yeah, and setting goals, y'all. Perfect.
Right, yes, goal setting.
goal setting. I love it. I love it. What about you, Jasmine?
Like, it's given me job experience, because you guys have to be setting up something, so I could work in that probably.
Jasmine is looking, for those of you who don't know, Jasmine's future growth intern of the
Yes.
year. So very excited about that. What about you, Ian?
Definitely graduating.
Thank you guys for sharing.
You're not alone in your journey. I will share you with that. You're in a good place.
The one that she had is
from Jamie. Okay, Jamie, thank you. It says, something I perceive in this conversation is Julie's active listening. Absolutely. She is engaged with the students' answers and is able to provide a brief synopsis of their points. This type of active listening is something more adults need to be educated on and encouraged to practice in their own day-to-day exchanges.
Don't we all need a Miss June?
Don't we all need it?
Yes, this will help students feel heard and included. Yes, and that's something, again, we do in the youth mental health first aid class. It is something that strives everyday conversation is active listening. It's a great point.
And one of the best ways you can show that is by repeating back what someone said to make sure you understand it, because sometimes you don't, right? You want to make sure you understand it. I love how excited you got India about that.
Yes.
Okay, so last question before we wrap this up. We have one more question. What has been one of the best lessons you've learned this year? Was there a specific moment or a specific lesson that you can share that might help other people? And it's okay if you don't have an answer, but if there's a specific thing that happened that you have learned from to do better at, or
Communication and being on time.
communication and being on time. What a great answer. The importance of being on time, because how do people feel when you're late?
They be like, oh, she don't want to do the job, but they just give a competence.
It's like a respect, right?
Yeah, I don't got the word, but I think they know what I mean.
Anyone else have anything? That's okay, you've done an amazing job, or did you have something?
What was the question again?
If there's a specific lesson.
Just communication and like to love yourself.
To love yourself.
Okay.
Well, I'm just absolutely just cannot, there aren't even words for how proud I am of all of you for being here and having this conversation. I don't know if I would have been able to do this as a youth at your age. I think you're all very brave and very wonderful, and I'm just so grateful that you were here. This concludes today's Coffee with a Purpose conversation, and I want to thank Jalen, Brooke, Zach, Owen, India, Jasmine, and of course Terry and Miranda, who you can't see behind the scenes, for really helping all of this come together so nicely. You represent all the very best of Jobs for Michigan graduates, and we could not be more proud of you all for being so open and honest with this conversation today. And thank you as well to Terry for taking the time to join us as a co-moderator. The work you do with us here at the Bridge Academy and for our community and for the state is so important, and we can't thank you enough. Youth Solutions is eager to partner with school districts and community-based organizations to foster belonging for youth by raising the youth voice, helping ensure that they're seen and heard, and by giving them access to different career paths through education, work experience programs, and life skills. If your school or organization is interested in exploring a partnership, please visit ouryouthsolutions.org. And if you would like to learn more about Youth Solutions, Jobs for Michigan graduates, the Bridge Academy of Southwest Michigan, or to learn more about youth mental health first aid and DEI, links to these programs will be posted in the chat for you to reference, and they will be on the clothing screen. So please reach out if you'd like information on any of these programs. And thank you all so much for coming. And last but never least, I want to thank our audience of over 60 viewers today for your time, your energy, your interest. It's connecting to people like you that helps JMG assist in the success of our youth for all of their future endeavors. And please join us again in the spring for parts 2 and 3 of our DEI roundtable discussions held in 2 more locations across the state. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone, and please plan to join us at the next purpose.
Bye, everybody.